Ever notice how the moment things get quiet, your mind decides it's time for an emergency meeting? Bills, deadlines, a problem you've been pretending isn't urgent yet. Suddenly you're wide awake. Not productive awake, survival awake. And the dangerous part is, this state quietly changes your decisions without you noticing. Most people call this anxiety, or stress, or just adulthood. But that's not what this is. This is pressure. And pressure quietly changes how your brain makes decisions. Under pressure, people don't make bad decisions because they're careless. They make them because their brain is optimizing for the wrong thing. And once you see what it's optimizing for, everything you've been blaming yourself for starts to make sense. I'm Dan, and this video is about how pressure quietly hijacks our decisions and how to take that control back. Here's why this matters. Pressure doesn't just make life uncomfortable, it quietly changes how decisions get made. And once that happens, even smart people start doing things that don't make sense later. Most advice assumes decisions happen in isolation, as if you choose badly because you didn't try hard enough, as if discipline or motivation was the missing ingredient. But decisions don't happen in a vacuum. They happen inside a system. And when that system is under pressure, the rules change. Under pressure, your brain stops asking, "What's the best long-term option?" and starts asking, "What gets me through today?" That shift isn't philosophical, it's biological. Planning, weighing trade-offs, imagining the future, those parts of the brain burn energy. So when resources feel tight, when outcomes feel uncertain, your brain conserves fuel by dialing those systems down. It's like trying to plan your future while a fire alarm is going off next to your desk. You can think, but you won't think well. And if someone later criticizes your decisions without acknowledging the alarm, that says more about them than you. This is where financial pressure becomes especially brutal. Money problems don't show up once and leave. They linger, they hover, they inject themselves into unrelated moments. You're thinking about changing jobs, but part of your brain is running numbers. You're planning the future, but part of your brain is replaying last month's overdraft. You're making a purchase, but also calculating how close you are to the edge. So the decision you're making isn't just about the decision, it's about everything else shouting for attention at the same time. That's why people under pressure don't optimize. They cope. And coping looks irrational from the outside. You know the better long-term move, you know it, but it costs more upfront, or requires patience, or demands mental energy you don't have right now. So you choose the option that feels worse tomorrow but better in the next 10 minutes. Later, you look back and ask, why did I do that? That's the wrong question. The real question is, what problem was I actually trying to solve in that moment? Because under pressure, the problem usually isn't the purchase, the job, or the plan. It's the noise. The decision is an attempt to quiet the noise. This is also why pressure is so hard to recognize while you're inside it. From the outside, the choices look obvious. From the inside, they feel urgent, and urgency collapses perspective. When everything feels immediate, the future stops feeling real. Not because you don't care, but because your brain can't afford to care yet. So decisions become smaller, shorter, more reactive. Not because you're short-sighted, but because pressure narrows the field of view. Imagine two people making the same income. One has a small buffer, a little room for mistakes, some slack. The other is running everything at the limit. No cushion, no margin. On paper, they look identical. In reality, they're living in different mental universes. For one person, a surprise expense is annoying. For the other, it's existential. So when both people face uncertainty, they're not starting from the same place. One brain is calm enough to think, the other is negotiating with fear. And fear is a terrible financial advisor. This is where society gets things painfully wrong. We look at outcomes and assume causes. Impulsive behavior becomes impulsive people. Instability becomes irresponsibility. Repeated mistakes become a lack of learning, but pressure prevents learning. When your brain is overloaded, you're not integrating lessons. You're surviving moments. That's why lectures don't work. That's why shame backfires. That's why just be disciplined advice fails so spectacularly. You can't reason someone out of a state their nervous system is actively maintaining. If you've ever felt like you know what you should do but can't do it consistently, this isn't a moral failure, it's a systems failure. And systems don't get fixed with motivation, they get fixed with structure. Here's the turning point most people miss. The opposite of pressure isn't wealth, it's buffer. A buffer is any gap between you and immediate consequences. It doesn't have to be huge, it just has to exist. That gap changes everything. Not because it solves all your problems, but because it gives your brain permission to stop panicking. When panic leaves, clarity returns. Not all at once, but enough to matter. This is why small amounts of stability create disproportionate change. The first bit of breathing room doesn't buy luxury. It buys time. It buys choice. It buys silence where noise used to be, and silence is where good decisions live. When people finally reach their first real buffer, it doesn't feel dramatic. There's no fireworks, no montage, no sudden confidence. What happens is quieter. They sleep better. They pause before reacting. They solve problems earlier instead of later. They stop living one step ahead of consequences. And that's when momentum quietly begins. The buffer doesn't just protect you from life. It protects you from your worst versions of yourself. The version that panics. The version that agrees to things out of fear. The version that trades tomorrow for today because today feels unbearable. When you have options, you don't have to be desperate. And desperation is where the most expensive decisions live. If you're under pressure right now, financially or otherwise, your job isn't to fix your entire future. Your job is to lower the volume, one notch at a time, one decision that buys you quiet, one buffer that gives your brain room to breathe. Because clarity doesn't come from trying harder, it comes from having enough space to see. You are not bad at decisions. You are making decisions inside a system that rewards urgency and punishes calm. Change the system, even slightly, and your choices will change with it. Not because you force them to, but because pressure no longer gets the final say. If this helped you understand why pressure keeps hijacking your decisions, please consider subscribing. These videos aren't about motivation, they're about changing the conditions so thinking gets easier. And if part of the pressure is constantly doing mental math, I've linked a free tool below that lays your money out on a calendar so you don't have to hold it all in your head. Stability changes the kind of problems you get to work on. Less panic, more choice. If you're building past the buffer, thinking about leverage, freedom, or long-term decisions, tell me what you want to explore next. I read the comments and they guide what I make.